This question asks you to create a console application called MarksDemo and add two classes in it, student and mark. You are provided with the content of the program.cs file in the console application. Just click the link to download it and you must use it exactly as is. So let's start this. Let's create our project called MarksDemo. Let's go to Visual Studio, File, New Project. It's a console application, and here we have the name that's given is MarksDemo, and we click Create. It says that you have been provided with the program class content. So I have it open here in a text editor. I click the link. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything here. I'm going to copy, and I'm going to replace everything that I have here in this file. I'm going to paste it. So you should not change this, and you should code the student class and the mark class that's going to provide the output on your main methods. So let's go back to the exercise. So let's create the class student and mark. So I'm going to go to the project, right click, go to add new item. I'm going to call the class as a student, and I'm going to create mark as well. I'll create both of them. So I have both of them. Now we're going to start to define the class mark, and here is the UML diagram for that. So we have two fields here, one private, one public. Let's start with them. So let's go to mark. So it's a private field called grade, and it's an integer. So I'm going to say int grade. And because we have this private, you have this public here, most likely it's reading from and writing to grade. So let's do this one here. So we have the grades, and then we have the public one, which is also an integer, called number of credits. Let's have a look at the description here. So grades is a private field, represents the grade for the course. We did that. Number of credits is the public read-only field. So it's read-only field. So I have to add the read-only keyword. So public read-only number of credits. It means that it can only be set in the constructor of the mark class. Then we're going to have course name, which is an auto-implemented property. So let's do that. Then we have the grade property here. Grade is a property that is accessor for grade field. So we're going to be using grade field to read and write to it. The valid grade is in the range of 0 to 100. The property will throw an exception in case of an invalid value with the message mark with value so and so is not valid. Value is the value of the invalid grade. Okay, so let's implement this property here. So I'm going to say public int grade. It's going to get the value from the grade property here, sorry, the grade field. So I'm going to say return grade, but then in the set is where we're going to have the exception there in case it is invalid. So I'm going to say if value is less than 0 or value is greater than 100, throw an exception. Throw new exception, and the message is mark with value so and so is not valid. Else we're gonna set the grade equals to the value. So that's our property. By the way, I decided to put the program code already here, but maybe so you can avoid all those error messages here, maybe it's a better strategy to wait to put the program code at the end after you are done with both class implementations, okay? Going back here, we have now a constructor with two parameters, course name and number of credits for the course. It assigns them to the appropriate members. So we're going to create the constructor now. I'm going to say public, the name of the class, which is mark, and then we have a string with the course name, and an int with the number of credits. We're just going to set them to the appropriate properties here. So course name equals to course name, and number of credits equals to number of credits. And that's our constructor. Going back here, now we have the toString. toString method that generates the string with information about the mark. Make sure that your output matches the one that is provided in the output image of the console result down below. So if we have a look at the output, we have to assume, we kind of see here that the mark is being provided in this line. Let's say program 1 with 2 credits, mark is 80. So we have to provide a way for the toString to give this kind of output. If you have a look as well in the program, you see that it's being printed out right here in the loops. You see the grade as well here. So it's being printed right from here. So we have to look at this and we have to output like this. The course name with course credits, mark is so and so. So that's the output. Okay, so let's see this in the mark here. We're gonna say public override string toString. Remember, toString is implemented in the object, so we have to override that. Then the format is like this. It's the course name with number of credits, mark is, and then we have the grade. So this output will match this line, each one of those lines. Okay, each one of those lines that mention about the specific mark. Moving on here, now we have the student class. Create the student class. We have created the class there, and we have to add. Let's start with the field GPA. It's a double. Let's see what it says. GPA is a private field containing the GPA of the student. So let's go there. Students, it's a private GPA. It's a private double. And then we have a GPA property that has only the set, that has only the get, set is absent. So I'm gonna say GPA public double GPA. It has only the get, and we get from the private GPA here. So I'm gonna say return GPA. After the GPA, we have the ID. So it's an integer, and it's an auto-implemented property representing the student ID. So let's do that. Scroll down, prop, tab. It's integer, and it's called ID. Then we have the, let's implement the name already. Let's skip here for a second, mark. Let's implement the name already because it's very similar. Name is auto-implemented as well, representing the student name. Okay, so I'm gonna go public string name, then we have a get and a set here. Okay, so now we have the marks, which is a read-only. Set is absent, and it's a list of marks. Okay, so marks is an auto-implemented read-only property that contains a list of mark objects of marks. Okay, so I'm gonna say that this is a public list of type mark. I'm gonna call this marks, and it only has the get. It's auto-implemented, it only has the get. Keep one thing in mind, we are just declaring here. We still need to create it. So we're gonna be creating it inside the constructor. Let's check there what we have. So marks, so we have now a public parameterless constructor that initializes marks properly. Great, so let's do that. This is the constructor here, the first one, the student one. So I'm gonna say public student parameterless, no parameters, and we're gonna create marks here. We're gonna say marks equals to new list marks. Okay, so that's the constructor without parameter. And then we have another constructor that takes two parameters, student ID and name, and assigns their values to the appropriate properties. Okay, so we're gonna have second one, public student. We have an int ID as a parameter and a string name as another parameter. We're gonna set the appropriate fields, the appropriate properties actually, and then we have name as well. That's gonna be equals to name. And then it says, make sure that there's no code duplication in the constructors. So what this means is that you would also need to create marks in the second constructor. However, to avoid copying and doing this, which to be quite honest, I'm going to accept this as well. That's fine. I'm gonna give the marks. But to avoid this kind of approach, you could call the default constructor by using this terminology here, this. When you do this, it calls the default constructor and then the new constructor. Again, I'm going to accept this approach, or even if you duplicate the code here, I will be accepting this as well. Go back there. Now we have the calculate GPA, which is a private method. Calculate GPA method calculates the student's GPA based on the current marks and assign it to the appropriate class member. What is the appropriate class member? The GPA. Okay? GPA is calculated as the sum of the weighted grades divided by the sum of credits. The weighted grades is calculated by multiplying a course grade by the number of credit courses. Okay, so there's a little math that goes on here, but I'm gonna go step by step as we develop the calculate GPA. So it's a private one. It's not gonna return anything, it's just gonna process, and it's called calculate GPA. Now I'm gonna declare two temporary variables here just to help us out. I'm gonna say int sum of weighted grades. So I'm gonna create this one first. And I'm gonna declare another one here, which I'm gonna call sum of credits. Okay, so we're gonna get those two temporary values just to help us out with the math. Now we're gonna go through a loop of the marks. Okay, we're gonna get the marks and go through a loop. So I'm gonna go for each mark m in marks. Marks is my collection. Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start to calculate the sum of grades, and this will be equals to plus equal, because we're going to be accumulating, and we're going to get the grade value, multiply that by the number of credits. That's the math as explained in the assignment, in the question. Okay, so that's the first one. And then we have also the sum of credits, which is, again, it's an accumulation of m dot number of credits. So it's just going to sum the number of credits. After the loop is done, we have the sum of weighted grades and the sum of credits, and we do the final calculation here for the GPA. So we're going to assign GPA, this guy here, we're going to assign it to sum of weighted grades equals to sum of weighted grades divided by the sum of credits. Now, we are using here, they are both integers. If we leave them as integers, this division will result in an integer, but I want a double. So, because I want to be precise, I want to have decimal points. So I'm going to cast this to double before I do the division, so that we can have a precise GPA value. So this is how we calculate the GPA. Now let's go back there. Now we're going to implement the add mark method. So we have this one here to implement. Add mark method has three parameters: course name, number of credits, and grade. The method will create the mark object, assigns the grade to the appropriate property, adds it to the list of marks for the students. Mark object is only added to the list of marks if the grade is assigned, i.e., there is no exception caused by grade outside of the range. Remember, the grade has to be within a valid range from 0 to 100, okay? And at the very end, this method, addMark, makes the necessary updates to the other members of the student object, like recalculating the GPA, because as we add another mark, we need to process the GPA once again. Okay, so let's go to the code there. Let's create public void addMark. We have string course name. We have an integer number of credits. We also have another integer, grade. And we're gonna assign it properly here. We're gonna say, we're gonna declare a new mark. Mark m equals to new mark. And new mark has a constructor that can receive the course name and the number of credits. But the constructor does not have a place for grade. So I'm gonna say m.grade. And I'm gonna set that to the grade parameter here. Once this is done, we have the new mark, and I'm gonna go to the marks collection, plural here, our marks collection, this list here, and then I'm gonna add to it. I'm gonna add m of the new mark. And after this is done, I'm gonna call calculate GPA, so that we can reprocess the GPA, taking into account the new mark that we have just added. And this is the end of it. If you look back at the question, it's just gonna show you the output. Let's compile this, and there we have. If we compare this output with this, we have a match here. That's about it.